Some of the largest stone structures on Earth were built thousands of years ago, not with machines, not with modern tools, but with planning, skill, and human effort alone. Across mountains, forests, deserts, and ancient cities, early civilizations carved giant statues, moved massive blocks, and created monuments that still exist today. In this video, we explore these extraordinary stone creations: colossal Buddhas carved into cliffs, enormous masks built into pyramids, massive stelae, ancient thrones, and structures so large they continue to challenge our understanding. Each one reveals what humans were capable of long before the modern world. Let's begin. The largest stone ever moved, the Thunderstone. A monument of engineering and determination in St. Petersburg. In the city of St. Petersburg, in a quiet open square near the Neva River, there stands a monument that appears at first to be about a man on horseback. The statue itself is impressive, but beneath it lies something far more extraordinary. A single piece of stone, massive, solid, unbroken. This is the Thunderstone, and it is the largest stone ever moved by human beings. Long before modern cranes, engines, or powered machinery, this enormous granite monolith was transported across land and water, reshaped, and placed precisely where it stands today. Its story is not ancient in the prehistoric sense, but it represents one of the greatest feats of physical engineering ever achieved without modern technology. The Thunderstone originally rested in marshland several kilometers away from its current location. It had been part of the natural landscape for thousands of years, formed slowly by geological forces deep beneath the Earth's surface. Over time, erosion exposed it, leaving it partially embedded in soft ground. Its size was immense. Weighing more than 1,500 tons in its original form, it dwarfed any stone previously moved intact. In the 18th century, during the reign of Catherine the Great, plans were made to construct a monument honoring Peter the Great, the founder of St. Petersburg. The monument required a pedestal worthy of its symbolic importance. Catherine wanted something that conveyed permanence, strength, and connection to the land itself. The Thunderstone was chosen, not because it was easy to move, but because it was not. Moving such a stone presented a challenge unlike anything attempted before. The marshy terrain made transport difficult. The sheer weight made conventional methods impossible. There were no machines capable of lifting or carrying it. Engineers had to invent new solutions. Instead of dragging the stone directly across the ground, they developed a system using metal spheres placed beneath a specially designed frame. This allowed the stone to roll slowly across prepared tracks. Workers coordinated movement carefully, advancing it in stages over many months. Progress was slow, measured, controlled. Every shift required precision. Eventually, the stone reached the shoreline, where it was loaded onto a specially constructed barge, supported by naval vessels. It was then transported across water to the center of St. Petersburg. This alone was unprecedented. Never before had a single stone of this size been transported in such a way. Once delivered, the stone was carefully shaped and positioned to serve as the base for what would become the Bronze Horseman Monument. Sculptors and engineers worked together to preserve its natural mass while refining its form. Unlike pedestals assembled from multiple blocks, the Thunderstone remained a single continuous piece. This mattered symbolically. It represented unity, strength, continuity. The monument above it honors Peter the Great, but the Thunderstone beneath it tells its own story, one of human persistence and ingenuity. Moving the stone required not just labor, but planning, innovation, and patience. Hundreds of workers participated. Engineers monitored every stage. Mistakes could not be allowed. The project demonstrated what organized effort could achieve even without modern technology. Over time, the Thunderstone became more than a pedestal. It became part of the identity of St. Petersburg itself. Visitors see the statue above, but the true foundation lies beneath. The stone connects human ambition to geological time. It reminds us that even in relatively recent history, people accomplished extraordinary feats using simple tools and collective effort. Standing beside it today, its scale is difficult to fully comprehend. The surface is smooth in places, rough in others. Its mass feels immovable, permanent. Yet it was moved, carefully, deliberately, across land and water. The Thunderstone represents a moment when engineering crossed a threshold. It proved that human ingenuity could overcome limits imposed by size and weight. It showed that determination, planning, and cooperation could reshape the landscape itself. Here, stone became symbol. Movement became achievement. Mass became memory. And beneath the monument in St. Petersburg, the largest stone ever moved by human hands continues to rest, carrying with it the story of one of history's most remarkable engineering accomplishments. The largest Buddha statue in a cliff, the Leshan, giant Buddha. A mountain carved into faith at Leshan giant Buddha. At the point where three rivers meet in Sichuan province in southwestern China, a massive human figure sits quietly carved into the side of a mountain. From a distance, it appears almost natural, as if the cliff itself slowly shaped into human form over time. But as you move closer, the scale becomes clear. This is not a natural formation. It is the Leshan giant Buddha, and it is the largest Buddha statue ever carved directly into a cliff face. Standing approximately 71 meters tall, the statue rises above the confluence of the Minjiang, Qingyi, and Dadu rivers. Its head alone measures more than 14 meters high. Each ear is large enough to stand beside. Its shoulders stretch wide across the rock, and its hands rest calmly on its knees, facing the flowing water below. The statue is not placed on the mountain. It is part of the mountain. More than 1,300 years ago, during the Tang Dynasty, a Buddhist monk named Haitong began the project. At the time, the rivers below were known for their dangerous currents. Boats navigating the confluence often faced unpredictable conditions, and travel through this region carried constant risk. Haitong believed that carving a Buddha into the cliff could bring spiritual protection and calm the waters. This belief reflects how closely religion, landscape, and daily life were connected. Construction began in the early 8th century. Workers started carving directly into the red sandstone cliff, removing enormous quantities of rock by hand. Every surface had to be shaped carefully. Every proportion had to remain balanced. This was not sculpture in isolation. It was sculpture integrated into geology. The project continued for decades. Haitong did not live to see its completion, but his followers carried the work forward. Generation after generation contributed to the carving, slowly transforming the cliff into the seated figure visible today. The engineering challenges were immense. Carving into a cliff of this size required more than artistic vision. It required understanding of structure, erosion, and stability. Removing too much rock in one area could weaken the entire formation. Every cut had to preserve the integrity of the mountain. What makes the Leshan Buddha especially remarkable is not only its size, but its durability. The builders designed an internal drainage system hidden within the statue. Channels were carved into the hair, shoulders, arms, and clothing to allow rainwater to flow away safely. This prevented water from collecting and eroding the structure. These drainage channels remain functional more than 1,000 years later. This reflects careful planning, technical awareness, long-term thinking. The statue was completed around the year 803 CE. By then, it had become one of the most recognizable religious monuments in the region. Pilgrims traveled long distances to see it. Boats passing below moved beneath its calm gaze. The rivers continued to flow. The statue remained still. Its presence reshaped the landscape itself. Beyond its religious function, the Leshan Buddha also served as a demonstration of Tang Dynasty capability. The Tang period was one of China's most stable and culturally rich eras. Trade expanded. Cities grew. Art and architecture flourished. The Buddha represented both spiritual devotion and technical achievement. Life around the statue developed gradually. Temples were built nearby. Pathways were carved into the cliff, allowing visitors to descend beside the figure. From certain angles, the statue disappears into the rock. From others, its full form emerges. This interaction between visibility and concealment gives the monument its unique character. It does not dominate the mountain. It emerges from it. Over centuries, dynasties rose and fell. Political systems changed. Wars passed through the region. Yet the Buddha endured. Wind, rain, and time left their marks. Moss and vegetation appeared in places. Sections weathered unevenly. But the internal drainage system continued to protect the core structure. Unlike monuments assembled from blocks, the Leshan Buddha cannot collapse in the same way. It is anchored to the mountain itself. Standing near the base of the statue today, its scale is difficult to fully grasp. The toes alone are large enough to walk across. The face, calm and balanced, looks outward across the river valley. It does not express motion. It expresses stillness. Above, carved stairways follow the curve of the cliff. Visitors move slowly along these paths, descending past the statue's shoulders, arms, and legs. Each level reveals different details, different perspectives. From the river below, the Buddha appears even larger. The cliff rises vertically, and the seated figure fills the entire frame of view. Boats move quietly across the water, reinforcing the relationship between sculpture and environment. The choice of location was deliberate. The statue faces the confluence. It observes movement. It anchors space. The Leshan giant Buddha represents more than religious devotion. It represents long-term collaboration. The work began with one individual, but it required generations to complete. No single builder saw it finished from beginning to end. This continuity reflects a cultural mindset that extended beyond individual lifetimes. It was built for permanence, not speed, not efficiency, but endurance. Over time, the statue became part of regional identity. It survived political transitions, environmental change, and shifting religious practices. It remained visible while surrounding societies evolved. Today, it stands as a UNESCO World Heritage Site, recognized not only for its artistic significance, but for its integration with natural landscape. Here, mountain became monument. Stone became expression. Landscape became belief. The Leshan giant Buddha reminds us that some of humanity's most remarkable achievements were not built by machines, but carved slowly, patiently, and deliberately by human hands working in cooperation with nature. And beside the flowing rivers of Sichuan, the giant figure continues to sit in silence, unchanged in its posture, watching time move forward around it. Largest stone stele ever attempted, the Yangshan stele, the monument that was too large to move at Yangshan Quarry. In the hills outside the city of Nanjing in eastern China, there is a quarry where the rock itself holds the outline of an unfinished monument. At first, it does not appear unusual. The landscape is quiet. Stone walls rise naturally from the earth. But carved into the bedrock are enormous rectangular forms, partially separated from the mountain. They are not random cuts. They are the remains of one of the most ambitious stone projects ever attempted. This is the Yangshan stele, and had it been completed, it would have been the largest stone monument ever created from a single continuous assembly. A stele is a vertical stone slab, traditionally used in China to record important events, imperial achievements, or memorial inscriptions. Many Chinese steles still stand today, often placed on carved stone bases and topped with decorative elements. They served both historical and symbolic functions, preserving memory in physical form. But the Yangshan stele was different. It was designed to exceed all others in scale. Construction began during the early 15th century, under the rule of the Yongle Emperor of the Ming Dynasty. The emperor ordered the creation of an enormous stele to honor his father, the Hongwu Emperor, founder of the Ming Dynasty. The monument was intended to stand at the Ming Shaoling Mausoleum, the burial site of his father. The stele was not meant to be ordinary. It was meant to express absolute imperial authority. Workers were sent to Yangshan Quarry, where the stone quality was strong and consistent. There, they began cutting 3 separate pieces from the mountain: the base, the main body, and the top crown. Each piece was carved directly from solid rock. Each was enormous. The base block alone measures more than 30 meters long and 16 meters wide. Its estimated weight exceeds 16,000 tons. The main body intended to stand vertically, would have weighed nearly 9,000 tons. The top crown, which would have rested above the inscription, weighs several thousand tons more. Combined, the completed monument would have weighed more than 30,000 tons. This was far beyond anything previously attempted. The quarry workers spent months, possibly years, carefully carving the outlines of the steely components. They used iron tools, wedges, and manual labor to separate the stone from surrounding rock. Precision was essential. Cracks could not be allowed to form. The shapes emerged slowly. Stone became geometry. Mass became intention. But as the scale of the project became fully clear, a problem emerged. Even if the stone could be carved successfully, moving it would be nearly impossible. The Ming dynasty possessed advanced engineering knowledge for its time. Massive stones had been transported before using sledges, rollers, and river barges. But nothing approaching the scale of the Yangshan stele had ever been moved. The terrain between the quarry and the mausoleum included hills, uneven ground, and long distances. Moving individual blocks weighing thousands of tons would have required unprecedented coordination. No method existed to transport them safely. Eventually, the project was abandoned. The blocks remain where they were carved, still partially attached to the bedrock. They were never completed. They were never moved. They were never assembled. The stele exists only as potential, frozen in the quarry. This unfinished monument provides rare insight into the ambitions of Imperial China. It reflects not only technical capability, but also the limits of that capability. The Ming dynasty could conceive of such a project, organize the labor, and begin the work. But even with vast resources, physical reality imposed constraints. The abandoned blocks now serve as silent evidence of that boundary. Standing beside the base block today, its scale is difficult to comprehend. It stretches across the quarry floor like a separate landscape. The vertical slab intended as the stele body rises beside it, already immense even while horizontal. These stones were meant to stand upright. They were meant to carry inscriptions. They were meant to last for centuries. Instead, they remain part of the mountain. The Yangshan stele tells a different kind of story than completed monuments. It reveals the process rather than the final result. It shows the gap between ambition and execution. It demonstrates how engineering evolves through experimentation, including failure. Over 600 years later, the blocks remain remarkably well preserved. Weather has softened some edges. Vegetation has grown around them. But their form is still clear. Visitors walking through the quarry move between shapes that were meant to become one of the largest monuments in human history. Here, stone became ambition. Scale became obstacle. Mountain became unfinished monument. The Yangshan stele represents a moment when human intention reached beyond practical limits. It reminds us that even the most powerful empires encountered challenges they could not overcome. Yet in remaining unfinished, it offers something rare. A direct view into the moment when human engineering met its boundary. And in the quiet hills outside Nanjing, the largest stele ever attempted still rests where it began, carved but unmoved, waiting in silence within the mountain that first gave it form. The largest moai ever carved, El Gigante, the monument that never left the quarry at Rano Raraku. On a remote volcanic island in the Pacific Ocean, more than 3,000 kilometers from the coast of South America, there is a hillside where hundreds of giant stone figures remain frozen in place. Some stand upright. Some lie partially buried. Others are still attached to the rock from which they were carved. This place is known as Rano Raraku. It is the quarry where the moai of Easter Island were created. Among them lies the largest moai ever attempted. It is called El Gigante. Unlike the completed moai that stand along the island's coastline, El Gigante never left the quarry. It remains attached to the volcanic slope, its massive form only partially separated from the bedrock. Measuring more than 21 meters in length, it would have been nearly twice the height of most standing moai. Its estimated weight exceeds 200 tons. Even in its unfinished state, its scale is difficult to fully grasp. The people who carved El Gigante belonged to the Rapa Nui civilization, which settled Easter Island around the first millennium CE. Over generations, they developed a unique cultural tradition centered around the creation of moai, large stone figures representing ancestors. These figures were not decorative, they were symbolic. They embodied lineage, authority, and presence. Most moai were carved from compressed volcanic ash known as tuff, which is relatively soft compared to harder stone types. This allowed workers to shape large figures using stone tools. The carving process began with outlining the figure directly into the quarry wall. The front of the statue was shaped first. The face emerged gradually. The body followed. Only after the carving was nearly complete was the moai separated from the bedrock. El Gigante reached an advanced stage of carving, but it was never fully detached. The reasons remain uncertain, but its immense size likely created practical challenges that could not be overcome. Transporting moai across Easter Island required carefully coordinated movement. Smaller moai were moved upright using ropes and controlled rocking motion, allowing them to walk across the landscape. Others were transported horizontally using sledges. But El Gigante was far larger than any successfully transported statue. Moving it would have required methods beyond what had previously been achieved. The quarry itself provides important clues. Hundreds of moai in various stages of completion remain at Rano Raraku. Some were abandoned mid-process. Others were completed but never transported. This suggests that moai production was continuous, experimental, and adaptive. The creation of moai was deeply connected to Rapa Nui social structure. Each statue represented a specific ancestor, placed on ceremonial platforms known as ahu along the island's coast. From these platforms, the moai faced inland, symbolically, watching over their communities. They did not face the ocean, they faced the living. This orientation reflected their role as protectors and reminders of lineage continuity. Carving El Gigante would have required months or years of labor. Teams of workers shaped the volcanic rock using stone chisels made from harder basalt. Every surface was refined gradually. The proportions followed established cultural patterns, including elongated heads and simplified bodies. The decision to attempt such a large statue suggests ambition beyond practical necessity. It reflects a society pushing the limits of its technical and organizational capacity. At some point, the project stopped. The statue remained attached to the quarry slope. It was never raised, never transported, never placed on an ahu. Its unfinished state provides a rare view into the process of moai creation. Most completed statues reveal only the final result. El Gigante reveals the intermediate stage, showing how carving began within the mountain itself. Over time, environmental and social changes affected Rapa Nui society. Resource availability declined. Population pressures increased. Moai construction slowed and eventually stopped. Some statues were toppled during later conflicts. But El Gigante remained where it was carved, protected by its unfinished state. Today, visitors walking through Rano Raraku encounter hundreds of moai emerging from the earth. Some appear fully formed, standing partially buried by centuries of soil accumulation. Others lie horizontally, still attached to the rock. El Gigante remains the largest among them. It stretches across the slope, its full length visible only from certain angles. Standing beside it reveals the scale of human effort invested in its creation. Here, volcanic rock became ancestry. Scale became ambition. Quarry became monument. El Gigante represents the moment when Rapa Nui society reached the limits of its monumental tradition. It shows how cultural expression, engineering capability, and social identity converged in stone. Even unfinished, it remains one of the most powerful reminders of human ambition in prehistoric times. And on the quiet slopes of Rano Raraku, beneath open Pacific skies, the largest moai ever carved continues to rest exactly where it was born from the mountain. Largest Viking ship ever found, the Oseberg ship. A burial vessel preserved beneath the earth in Oseberg. In a quiet region of southern Norway, near the Oslofjord, there was once a low grassy mound that appeared no different from others scattered across the landscape. It did not stand high above the horizon. It did not attract attention. For centuries, it remained part of the natural terrain, its true significance hidden beneath layers of soil. But inside that mound rested one of the most extraordinary ships ever built during the Viking Age. This was the Oseberg ship. And unlike most ancient vessels, it was never lost at sea. It was buried deliberately. The ship dates to the early 9th century, a time when Viking societies across Scandinavia were expanding outward through exploration, trade, and migration. Ships were central to this world. They were tools of movement, allowing people to cross open oceans, navigate rivers, and connect distant regions. But the Oseberg ship was not built only for travel. It was built for ceremony. Measuring more than 21 meters in length and over 5 meters wide, the ship was constructed using overlapping oak planks fastened together with iron rivets. This method, known as clinker construction, gave the hull both strength and flexibility, allowing it to move smoothly through water. The design reflects advanced understanding of naval engineering. The hull is narrow but stable. The keel runs straight and balanced. The bow and stern curve upward in elegant arcs. At each end, intricate carvings form spirals and interwoven patterns. These decorations were not necessary for function. They served symbolic and cultural purposes, reflecting craftsmanship and identity. The ship was powered primarily by oars. 15 pairs of oar holes line each side, allowing 30 rowers to move the vessel efficiently. A mast positioned at the center supported a sail, enabling longer journeys when wind conditions allowed. This was a vessel capable of crossing open seas, but it never did. Instead, it was placed into the ground. The Oseberg ship was used as part of a burial ceremony for 2 women of high status. Archaeological evidence suggests that one was likely a queen or noble leader, while the other may have been a companion or attendant. Their bodies were placed inside a wooden burial chamber constructed on the deck of the ship. Around them, grave goods were carefully arranged. Furniture, textiles, carved sledges, tools, animal remains. These objects reflect both daily life and symbolic meaning. They were intended to accompany the deceased into the afterlife, providing continuity beyond death. After the burial chamber was completed, the entire ship was covered with earth, forming a mound above it. This mound protected the ship from weather and decay, preserving it for more than 1,000 years. The burial itself reflects Viking beliefs about death and transition. Ships represented movement between worlds. Placing the dead within a ship symbolized their journey beyond the physical realm. The Oseberg burial was not isolated. Ship burials occurred elsewhere in Viking society, but the preservation of the Oseberg ship is exceptional. In 1904, archaeologists began excavating the mound. As they removed layers of soil, the outline of the ship gradually appeared. Its wooden planks, though fragile, remained largely intact. The surrounding clay soil had preserved the wood by limiting exposure to oxygen. The discovery revealed one of the most complete Viking ships ever found. Every detail offered insight into Viking craftsmanship and social structure. The carvings remain especially significant. They demonstrate artistic skill and cultural symbolism. The patterns reflect traditions passed down through generations. The ship was not purely functional. It was expressive. It was identity made visible. Life during the Viking Age depended heavily on maritime capability. Ships allowed Vikings to explore Iceland, Greenland, and even North America. They connected Scandinavia to trade networks reaching the Middle East and beyond. The Oseberg ship represents the foundation of that mobility, but its burial reminds us that ships also held spiritual meaning. They were not only vehicles of expansion, they were vehicles of transition. Today, the restored ship is displayed in Norway, allowing visitors to see its structure clearly. Standing beside it reveals the scale of its construction. The wood curves smoothly. The keel runs straight. The carved ends rise upward. It feels both strong and delicate. It was built to move across water. Instead, it moved through time. Here, wood became vessel. Burial became journey. Ship became memory. The Oseberg ship remains one of the most important archaeological discoveries of the Viking world. It reveals how advanced Viking shipbuilding had become and how deeply ships were integrated into social and spiritual life. And beneath what was once an ordinary grassy mound, this vessel preserved the story of a society defined by movement, craftsmanship, and belief. The giant stone anchors of Dwarka, India. Evidence of an ancient maritime port beneath the sea at Dwarka. Off the western coast of India, where the Arabian Sea meets the shoreline of Gujarat, there are objects resting silently beneath the water that once played a critical role in ancient maritime life. They do not rise like monuments above the land. They do not appear in open landscapes. They remain submerged, partially buried in sand and shaped by centuries of ocean movement. These are the stone anchors of Dwarka, and they represent physical evidence of one of the oldest known port regions in South Asia. Unlike modern anchors made from metal, these anchors were carved from solid stone. They are heavy, geometric, and designed with carefully cut holes that allowed ropes to pass through and secure ships in place. Some are triangular, others are rectangular or composite in shape. Their surfaces are worn by time and water, yet their purpose remains clear. They were built to hold ships steady, to resist current, to control movement. The discovery of these anchors beneath the sea revealed something important. This coastline was not always as it appears today. Over thousands of years, changes in sea level, erosion, and geological processes altered the boundary between land and water. Areas that were once part of active shoreline now lie beneath the surface. Dwarka was once a major coastal settlement. Its location made it ideal for maritime activity. Positioned along important sea routes connecting the Indian subcontinent with the Arabian Peninsula, East Africa, and beyond, Dwarka became part of a network of trade that existed long before modern navigation. Ships arriving here needed reliable anchoring systems. Stone anchors provided that solution. Each anchor was carved with precision. The holes were positioned to allow wooden crossbars and rope attachments, increasing stability. When lowered into water, the anchor's weight and shape allowed it to grip the seabed. These anchors were not small objects. Some weigh hundreds of kilograms. Moving them required coordination and effort. Their presence indicates ships of significant size and capability. Marine archaeological surveys have revealed multiple anchors scattered across the seabed near Dwarka. Their distribution suggests organized harbor activity rather than isolated use. This was not a temporary anchorage. It was a functioning port environment. Life in ancient Dwarka was closely tied to the sea. Trade brought goods, ideas, and cultural exchange. Maritime routes connected distant regions, allowing movement of materials such as metals, ceramics, and textiles. The anchors represent infrastructure supporting that movement. They reflect planning, engineering, adaptation to environment. Unlike structures built on land, underwater objects face continuous change. Currents shift sediment. Marine growth covers surfaces. Visibility changes over time. Yet the stone anchors remain, recognizable, preserved by the same water that once gave them purpose. Their durability comes from material and design. Stone does not decay like wood. It endures. The anchors also provide insight into shipbuilding traditions. Ships capable of carrying such anchors were structurally strong and large enough to require reliable mooring systems. This indicates advanced maritime capability. Dwarka's significance extends beyond its anchors. Archaeological exploration has identified submerged walls, stone blocks, and structural remains near the coastline. These findings suggest that parts of the ancient settlement now lie underwater. Environmental change gradually reshaped the landscape. What was once land became sea. What was once visible became hidden. The anchors remained where they were last used. Standing on the modern shoreline today, the sea appears calm and continuous. But beneath its surface lies evidence of human activity from thousands of years ago. The anchors are silent markers. They show where ships once stopped, where trade once happened, where communities connected with distant worlds. Unlike towering monuments, their importance lies in function rather than visibility. Here, stone became stability, weight became control, sea became archive. The giant stone anchors of Dwarka reveal that maritime engineering was already sophisticated in ancient South Asia. They demonstrate how coastal societies adapted to ocean environments and built systems to support navigation and trade. Even beneath moving water, their presence remained steady. And off the coast of Dwarka, resting on the seabed, these ancient anchors continue to hold their place, preserving the memory of a port that once connected land and sea. The giant stone guardians of Ain Dara Temple. Footprints and lions at Ain Dara Temple. In northern Syria, near the modern border with Turkey, there once stood a temple built from heavy stone blocks, positioned on a raised platform overlooking the surrounding plains. Today, much of the structure lies in ruins, but what remains reveals something unusual. Carved directly into the stone floor are enormous footprints, far larger than any human foot. They begin at the entrance. They move forward into the temple, and then they stop. These are not accidental marks. They were carved deliberately, and it was built to represent the presence of something larger than human scale. The temple dates to approximately the early 1st millennium BCE, during the time of the Syro-Hittite kingdoms. These were regional states that emerged after the collapse of the larger Hittite Empire, maintaining many of its architectural and cultural traditions. Ain Dara was one of their ceremonial centers. The temple itself followed a structured design common to sacred architecture of the region. A broad staircase led upward to the main entrance. Stone walls enclosed a rectangular interior divided into sections, guiding movement from the outer courtyard into inner chambers. The most striking feature appears immediately at the threshold. Carved into the floor are 3 giant footprints. Each measures nearly 1 meter in length. They are shaped like human feet, with defined toes and heel, but their scale is far beyond normal human proportions. The placement is intentional. The first footprint appears at the entrance. The next lies several steps inside. The third rests deeper within the temple. They suggest movement, entry, presence, but not human presence. The footprints were likely symbolic, representing a deity entering the temple space. In ancient Near Eastern belief, temples were considered physical houses of gods. The footprints made that invisible presence visible. They transformed belief into stone. Visitors entering the temple would have seen these impressions and understood their meaning. They were reminders that the space belonged to a divine occupant. The temple's exterior reinforced this symbolism. Massive basalt lion sculptures stood at the entrance, positioned as guardians. Their forms were carved with strong limbs, defined muscles, and forward-facing posture. They did not merely decorate the temple, they protected it. Lions in ancient Near Eastern cultures symbolized strength, authority, and divine power. Placing them at the entrance created both physical and symbolic protection. The temple was constructed from large stone blocks, carefully shaped and positioned. The platform elevated the structure above surrounding ground level, making it visible from a distance. Elevation reinforced importance. Visibility reinforced authority. Inside, the temple contained open halls and inner sanctuaries. These spaces were likely used for ritual activity, offerings, and ceremonial gatherings. Priests would have controlled access, maintaining separation between ordinary people and sacred interior zones. The architectural design guided movement intentionally. Visitors progressed step by step toward the inner chamber, experiencing increasing separation from the outside world. This transition reflected spiritual progression, from public space to sacred space to divine presence. The giant footprints were part of that experience. They made the invisible visible. They created physical evidence of belief. Ain Dara's construction reflects advanced stoneworking knowledge. The blocks were cut and aligned precisely. Decorative carvings covered parts of the walls. Animal figures and symbolic patterns reinforced religious meaning. The temple remained active for centuries, serving successive generations. It stood during periods of political change, shifting alliances, and regional conflict. Eventually, its use declined. The structure fell into ruin. Wind and weather eroded exposed surfaces. Earth covered parts of the platform. The temple became part of the landscape once again. Yet the footprints remained. They survived because they were carved directly into solid stone. Today, the ruins of Ain Dara still reveal its original form. Visitors can walk across the same platform where ancient rituals took place. The footprints remain visible, preserved in the rock. Standing beside them, their scale becomes clear. They are larger than human feet, but shaped like them. This creates a direct connection between human perception and divine imagination. The lions at the entrance, though weathered, still face outward. Their posture remains alert. They continue to guard the temple, even in ruin. Ain Dara represents a moment when architecture and belief merged completely. Every element of the structure reinforced its purpose. The platform elevated it. The lions protected it. The footprints defined its occupant. Here, stone became presence. Carving became belief. Temple became boundary. The giant stone guardians of Ain Dara remind us that ancient societies did not build temples only as physical structures. They built them as spaces where the human and divine worlds could intersect. And in the silent ruins of northern Syria, carved into stone that has endured for thousands of years, the giant footprints still mark the path of a presence that was never meant to be human. The giant stone statues of Mount Nemrut. The silent heads above the clouds at Mount Nemrut High in the mountains of southeastern Turkey, where the air becomes thinner and the landscape opens into wide, silent horizons. There is a summit where giant stone heads rest scattered across the ground. They do not stand upright. They do not face a single direction. Instead, they sit quietly, separated from the bodies they once belonged to. This is Mount Nemrut, and these are some of the largest stone statues ever created in the ancient world. Each head measures nearly 2 meters in height. Their faces are calm, symmetrical, and deliberate. Eyes look forward without expression. Lips remain neutral. Their scale is unmistakable. They were not carved to represent ordinary people. They were carved to represent kings and gods. The statues were built in the 1st century BCE, during the reign of King Antiochus I of Commagene. Commagene was a small but strategically important kingdom located between larger empires, including Rome and Parthia. Positioned between powerful neighbors, its rulers developed a unique identity that blended cultural traditions from multiple regions. Antiochus I ordered the construction of a massive royal sanctuary at the summit of Mount Nemrut. The location itself was part of the message. The summit rises more than 2,000 meters above sea level. Reaching it requires effort. The isolation creates distance from ordinary life. The mountain becomes both physical and symbolic elevation. The sanctuary includes a large artificial mound made from crushed stone. Beneath this mound lies the king's tomb, though the exact burial chamber has never been found. Surrounding the mound, colossal statues were placed on terraces facing east and west. These statues depicted Antiochus himself seated among gods. He presented himself as equal to divine figures. This was not subtle symbolism, it was direct. The statues were carved from limestone blocks and assembled piece by piece. Each figure originally stood upright, seated on stone thrones. The heads were positioned above massive bodies, forming complete human-like figures several meters tall. Over time, earthquakes and natural erosion caused the heads to fall forward. The bodies remained, the heads separated. Now they sit in rows, detached but still recognizable. This separation gives the site its unique appearance. The heads appear almost independent, as if observing the landscape on their own. Their expressions remain unchanged, calm, still, enduring. The placement of the statues was carefully planned. The eastern terrace faces sunrise. The western terrace faces sunset. This alignment reflects awareness of solar movement and its symbolic importance. Light and shadow interact with the statues throughout the day. At sunrise, light touches their faces slowly. At sunset, shadows stretch across the stone. The experience changes with time. Construction at this altitude required extraordinary effort. Stone blocks had to be quarried, transported, and positioned on steep slopes. Workers operated in harsh mountain conditions, facing wind, cold, and isolation. This was not efficient construction. It was deliberate construction. Antiochus intended the sanctuary to preserve his legacy permanently. He left inscriptions describing his vision and explaining the religious meaning of the site. He believed that placing his image among gods ensured eternal remembrance. The sanctuary served both political and spiritual purposes. It reinforced authority. It expressed belief. It shaped identity. After Antiochus's death, the kingdom of Commagene eventually lost its independence. Larger empires absorbed its territory. Political power shifted. The sanctuary was no longer maintained. Natural forces took over. Earthquakes destabilized the statues. Heads fell from bodies. Stone weathered slowly. But the monument remained. For centuries, the summit was largely forgotten by the outside world. The statues sat exposed to wind, snow, and sunlight. Their scale prevented them from disappearing entirely, but their isolation protected them from major alteration. Today, reaching Mount Nemrut still requires climbing. The path rises steadily. The summit appears gradually, and then the heads come into view. They sit in silence, facing outward across mountains and sky. Standing beside them reveals their true scale. Their features are human, but enlarged beyond ordinary proportion. They represent authority made permanent in stone. Here, mountain became monument. Stone became identity. Elevation became memory. The giant stone statues of Mount Nemrut represent one ruler's attempt to place himself beyond time. They demonstrate how architecture and landscape can merge to create lasting presence. Even broken, even separated, the heads remain powerful. And high above the valleys of southeastern Turkey, beneath open sky and shifting light, they continue to watch in silence, exactly where they were placed more than 2,000 years ago. The giant stone eagle of Göbekli Tepe. The first monumental sculptures of human civilization at Göbekli Tepe. On a hilltop in southeastern Turkey, where dry grasslands stretch outward beneath wide open skies, there is a place where massive stone pillars rise from the earth in carefully arranged circles. These pillars are not plain. Their surfaces are covered with carvings of animals: foxes, snakes, wild boars, and birds. Among them is one of the most striking figures, a giant bird, often interpreted as an eagle or vulture. Its wings extend across the surface of the stone, its body carved with precision and intention. Though motionless, it conveys presence. It is not decorative, it is symbolic. This is Göbekli Tepe, and these sculptures are among the oldest monumental carvings ever created by human beings. Göbekli Tepe was built more than 11,000 years ago, long before the invention of metal tools, pottery, or written language. It belongs to a time when human societies were still transitioning from hunting and gathering towards settled life. Yet here, on this hill, they created something monumental. The pillars themselves are enormous. Some stand more than 5 meters tall and weigh up to 20 tons. Each one was carved from solid limestone using stone tools. Workers shaped the pillars carefully, smoothing surfaces and carving detailed reliefs. The animals are not random. They appear repeatedly. Each species carries symbolic meaning. The bird figures are especially important. In many early cultures, birds represented transition between earth and sky. Their ability to fly connected them to spiritual ideas of movement between worlds. At Göbekli Tepe, bird carvings appear prominently on central pillars. One well-known relief shows a large bird holding a circular object, possibly representing the sun or a human head. This imagery suggests ritual meaning connected to life, death, and transformation. The pillars themselves are arranged in circular enclosures. At the center of each circle stand 2 larger pillars facing each other. These central pillars are taller and more elaborate than the surrounding ones. Their shape resembles stylized human figures, arms carved along the sides, hands resting near the waist. They represent presence, authority, identity. The surrounding animal carvings may represent forces associated with these central figures. The construction of Göbekli Tepe required organized labor on a scale previously thought impossible for hunter-gatherer societies. Quarrying limestone blocks, transporting them, and positioning them upright demanded planning and coordination. This challenges older assumptions about early human development. Monumental architecture appeared before agriculture became fully established. belief came first. Settlement followed. The site does not show evidence of permanent housing nearby. This suggests Göbekli Tepe was not a residential village. It was a ceremonial center. People traveled here. They gathered. They built. They carved. The giant bird sculptures were part of that environment. They transformed stone into symbolic presence. They made belief visible. The hill itself became sacred space. Over centuries, multiple enclosures were built and later buried deliberately. New structures replaced older ones. This process repeated over generations. Eventually, the entire site was covered and abandoned. It remained hidden for thousands of years, protected by earth, preserved by time. When archaeologists uncovered Göbekli Tepe in the 20th century, its significance became clear immediately. It represented one of the earliest known examples of monumental sculpture and architecture. The carvings remain sharp. The animals remain recognizable. The giant bird still stretches across the pillar surface. Standing beside these carvings today, their age becomes difficult to comprehend. They were created before cities, before kingdoms, before writing. Yet they reflect advanced artistic skill and symbolic thought. They show that early humans were capable of shaping their environment not only for survival, but for meaning. Here, limestone became symbol. Carving became belief. Pillar became presence. The giant stone eagle of Göbekli Tepe represents one of humanity's earliest attempts to give permanent form to ideas that could not otherwise be seen. And on this quiet hill in southeastern Turkey, beneath open sky and shifting light, these ancient carvings continue to stand as silent witnesses to the beginning of monumental human expression. The giant stone Buddha of Bamiyan. The colossal figures carved into the Afghan cliffs at Bamiyan Valley. In the high valleys of central Afghanistan, where mountains rise in layered ridges and wind moves across wide open terrain, there is a cliff face marked by enormous empty spaces. These spaces are not natural caves. They are shaped deliberately, carved into the rock with precision and purpose. They once held some of the largest Buddha statues ever created. This is the Bamiyan Valley, and these cliffs were transformed into monumental expressions of belief more than 1,500 years ago. At their full height, the two largest Buddha statues stood approximately 38 and 55 meters tall. They were not built from separate stone blocks. They were carved directly into the sandstone cliff, making them part of the mountain itself. The stone formed the structure. The mountain became the monument. Carving such figures required extraordinary effort. Workers cut into the cliff face slowly, removing massive quantities of rock. They shaped the body first, defining the outline of the robe, shoulders, and head. Fine details were added later using plaster and pigment, giving the statue's surface texture and color. These were not plain stone figures. They were once painted, bright, visible from great distances. The Bamiyan Valley occupied a critical position along the Silk Road, the network of trade routes connecting East Asia, Central Asia, and the Middle East. Travelers, merchants, monks, and pilgrims passed through this valley regularly. The statues stood as markers of spiritual presence. They defined the landscape. They guided travelers. Buddhism had spread into this region centuries earlier, carried by monks and merchants moving along trade routes. Bamiyan became an important religious center, with monasteries carved into the surrounding cliffs. Hundreds of smaller caves served as living quarters, meditation spaces, and shrines. The giant Buddhas formed the center of this complex. They represented calm, stability, endurance. The statues were positioned facing outward across the valley. Their elevated placement allowed them to be seen from below. This visibility reinforced their symbolic role as protectors and spiritual anchors. Creating sculptures of this scale required coordination across generations. The work likely continued over decades. Teams of workers carved, shaped, and refined the figures using iron tools and manual labor. Engineering knowledge was essential. The cliff had to remain stable. The statues had to resist erosion. Structural integrity had to be preserved. Internal supports and external coatings helped strengthen the figures. For centuries, the statues endured. Empires rose and fell around them. Trade routes shifted. religions changed. Yet the Buddhas remained part of the landscape. They witnessed movement across the Silk Road. They watched travelers pass beneath them. They became part of regional identity. Even as political control changed, the statues remained visible. Their scale made them impossible to ignore. The surrounding caves preserved paintings, inscriptions, and evidence of monastic life. These findings reveal a community deeply connected to spiritual practice and cultural exchange. Bamiyan was not isolated. It was connected to the wider world. Over time, natural erosion affected parts of the statues. Surface details softened, colors faded. But their overall form remained intact. They continued to stand for more than a millennium. Today, the statues themselves no longer stand in their original form. What remains are the enormous niches carved into the cliff, marking where they once existed. Fragments of stone and traces of carving still reveal their original scale. The empty spaces are powerful. They preserve the outline. They preserve the memory. Standing in the valley, looking up at the cliff, the scale remains clear. The niches rise high, above the ground. The mountain still carries the imprint of human effort. Here, stone became belief. Cliff became monument. Landscape became presence. The giant stone Buddha of Bamiyan represents one of humanity's most ambitious attempts to merge art, religion, and geology. It demonstrates how early societies transformed natural environments into lasting expressions of identity. Even in absence, the site continues to communicate its original purpose. And in the quiet valley beneath the Afghan mountains, the cliff still holds the form of figures that once stood among the largest sculptures ever created by human hands. The giant stone slab of Cusco, the 12-angle stone. Precision engineering of the Inca world at Cusco. In the historic center of Cusco, Peru, along a narrow stone street that has existed for centuries, there is a wall built from massive stone blocks fitted together with extraordinary precision. At first glance, the wall appears uniform, each stone connected tightly to the next. But one stone stands apart. It has 12 distinct angles, 12 edges, 12 surfaces, each shaped to connect perfectly with the stones around it. This is the 12-angle stone, and it represents one of the most precise examples of stonework ever created without modern tools. The stone forms part of a larger wall built by the Inca civilization, which flourished in the Andes Mountains during the 15th and early 16th centuries. Cusco was the capital of this empire, serving as its political, cultural, and administrative center. The wall itself belonged to an important structure, likely part of a palace or administrative complex. Unlike modern construction, which often relies on mortar to bind materials together, Inca builders used a technique known as dry stone masonry. Each block was cut and shaped so precisely that it fit directly against neighboring stones without the need for binding material. The 12-angle stone is a perfect example of this method. Its 12 sides align exactly with the surrounding blocks. There are no gaps, no instability. Each angle serves a structural purpose. The stone weighs several tons. Moving it into place required careful planning and coordination. Workers transported such stones from quarries using ropes, ramps, and human effort. Once positioned near the wall, the stone was shaped gradually, tested against adjacent blocks, and refined until it fit perfectly. This process could take weeks or months for a single stone. Every adjustment mattered. Every surface had to match. The result was a structure of remarkable strength. Inca stone walls have survived earthquakes that destroyed later buildings constructed with less precise methods. The interlocking shapes allowed stones to shift slightly during seismic movement and then settle back into place without collapsing. Flexibility was built into the design. The 12-angle stone demonstrates the sophistication of this engineering approach. Its multiple angles increase stability by distributing pressure across many surfaces. The shape prevents movement in any single direction. It locks itself into the wall. Life in Cusco during the Inca Empire revolved around structured organization and centralized authority. The city was carefully planned, with temples, administrative buildings, and residential areas arranged according to symbolic and practical principles. Stone architecture reflected imperial identity. It conveyed permanence, strength, order. The Inca did not use iron tools. Instead, they shaped stone using harder rocks, hammering and grinding surfaces gradually. The process required patience and skill. Builders relied on observation, touch, and experience rather than mechanical measurement. This created structures uniquely adapted to their environment. The wall containing the 12-angle stone has remained standing for centuries. When Spanish colonizers arrived in the 16th century, they built new structures on top of existing Inca foundations. Many Spanish buildings collapsed during earthquakes. The Inca walls remained intact. Their strength came from precision. Their stability came from design. Today, the 12-angle stone remains in its original position along Hatun Rumiak Street. Visitors walk beside it daily. Its surface is smooth from centuries of contact. Its edges remain sharp and clear. Standing before it reveals something unusual. The stone does not appear forced into place. It appears inevitable, as if it belongs exactly where it is. Here, shape became structure. Precision became strength. Stone became permanence. The 12-angle stone represents more than technical skill. It reflects a cultural approach to construction rooted in harmony between material and design. Instead of forcing stone into uniform shapes, Inca builders adapted each block to its specific position. Every stone was unique, every connection intentional. And in the ancient streets of Cusco, surrounded by walls that have endured centuries of change, the 12-angle stone continues to demonstrate one of humanity's most refined achievements in architectural precision. The giant stone stelae of Aksum, monoliths of an ancient African kingdom at Aksum. In the northern highlands of Ethiopia, where elevated plateaus rise above surrounding valleys and the air carries a quiet stillness, there stands a field of massive stone monuments carved from single pieces of granite. From a distance, they appear like tall, narrow towers emerging directly from the earth. These are the stelae of Aksum, and they are among the largest stone monoliths ever erected by an ancient civilization. Some of these stone pillars rise more than 20 meters into the air. Others lie broken on the ground, their massive forms revealing both the ambition and the limits of those who built them. Each stele was carved from a single block of granite, shaped and raised without modern machinery. They were not assembled. They were lifted whole. The kingdom of Aksum flourished between the 1st and 7th centuries, CE. It was one of the most powerful civilizations in ancient Africa, controlling trade routes that connected the African interior to the Red Sea and beyond. Its location allowed Aksum to interact with regions as distant as Rome, India, and Arabia. Trade brought wealth. Wealth supported construction. Construction reinforced authority. The stelae were built as grave markers for important individuals, most likely kings and elite members of society. Beneath many of these monuments lie underground burial chambers carved into the earth. The stelae above marked the presence of the tomb below. But these were not simple markers. They were designed to resemble buildings. The surfaces of the stelae are carved with patterns that imitate doors, windows, and floors. These carvings transform the stone into a symbolic representation of a multi-story structure. They suggest permanence, residence, continuation. In this way, the stele functioned as both tomb marker and symbolic dwelling for the deceased. The largest standing stele in Aksum today measures more than 24 meters in height and weighs hundreds of tons. Even larger stelae were attempted. One enormous stele, estimated to weigh more than 500 tons, now lies broken on the ground. It likely fell during construction or erection. Its size reveals the scale of ambition. Quarrying these stones required precise planning. Workers cut directly into granite bedrock, shaping the stele while still attached to the quarry floor. Once fully formed, the monolith had to be separated and transported to the erection site. This required coordination, manpower, and engineering. The stone had to be moved without cracking. It had to remain intact. It had to be raised vertically. The exact methods used remain uncertain, but they likely involved ramps, ropes, and controlled lifting techniques. The process would have required careful balance and timing. The effort reflects not only technical skill, but centralized authority capable of organizing large labor forces. Axum was not isolated. It was part of a broader world connected through maritime and overland trade. Goods such as ivory, gold, and incense moved through Axumite territory. The wealth generated supported monumental construction projects. The stelae reinforced political legitimacy. They demonstrated control. They expressed permanence. Over centuries, the kingdom of Axum evolved. Christianity became the dominant religion in the 4th century CE, transforming cultural practices. Monument construction slowed and eventually stopped. Natural forces affected the monuments over time. Earthquakes, erosion, and structural instability caused some stelae to fall. Others remained standing. Despite these changes, the site endured. Today, the stelae field remains one of the most important archaeological landscapes in Africa. The monoliths rise from open ground, their surfaces still carrying carved details created more than 1,500 years ago. Standing beside one reveals its scale clearly. The granite surface feels smooth in some areas, rough in others. The carved windows and doors create the illusion of architectural form. But it is solid stone, one continuous piece. Here, granite became symbol. Height became authority. Stone became legacy. The giant stone stelae of Axum represent a civilization that transformed natural material into lasting expressions of identity and power. They demonstrate how architecture can exist without buildings, how structure can exist without interior space. Even broken, even weathered, the stelae continue to define the landscape. And in the highlands of Ethiopia, beneath open sky and shifting light, these massive stone monuments remain standing, preserving the memory of one of Africa's greatest ancient kingdoms. Galvihara, Sri Lanka. The Giant Stone. Buddhas carved from a single granite wall at Galvihara. In the ancient city of Polonnaruwa in Sri Lanka, where forests surround the remains of temples and stone pathways, still mark the outlines of a once thriving capital, there is a granite cliff face that has been transformed into one of the most remarkable sculptural sites in the Buddhist world. This is Galvihara, and here, an entire series of giant Buddha figures was carved directly into a single wall of natural rock. Unlike statues built from separate blocks or assembled piece by piece, the figures at Galvihara are part of the granite itself. The stone was not brought here. It was already here. Sculptors worked directly into its surface, removing material slowly until human forms emerged. The result is not one statue, but 4. Each carved from the same continuous rock formation, each representing a different posture, each expressing a different aspect of stillness. The largest of these figures is the reclining Buddha, measuring more than 14 meters in length. The figure lies on its side, head resting on a carved stone pillow, body extended along the rock face. The posture represents the moment of final passing, known in Buddhist tradition as parinirvana. It symbolizes the end of physical existence and the release from the cycle of rebirth. The face remains calm. The posture remains balanced. Nothing in the figure suggests tension. Nearby stands another Buddha figure, carved upright, arms crossed, body vertical against the rock surface. This standing figure measures more than 7 meters in height. Its expression is composed, reflective, and inward. There is also a seated Buddha carved into a shallow rock-cut chamber, positioned in meditation posture. The figure sits with legs crossed and hands resting calmly. Each statue reflects a different state of awareness. Together, they form a sequence. They represent stages of spiritual transition. Galvihara was created during the 12th century, under the rule of King Parakramabahu I. During his reign, Polonnaruwa became one of the most important political and religious centers in Sri Lanka. The king invested heavily in construction, including temples, reservoirs, and monasteries. Galvihara formed part of this larger transformation. The sculptures were not isolated works of art. They were integrated into a functioning religious environment. Monks lived nearby. Rituals were performed regularly. The statues served as focal points for meditation and devotion. Carving figures of this scale required planning and precision. Sculptors had to understand the structure of the granite. Removing too much material in one area could weaken the entire figure. The process was gradual, careful, irreversible. Once stone was removed, it could not be replaced. The sculptors worked with simple tools, shaping surfaces through repeated strikes and refinement. Every contour was defined, by hand. Despite this, the figures show remarkable anatomical balance. Proportions remain accurate. Expressions remain subtle. Surface details remain precise. The granite itself contributed to preservation. Unlike softer stone types, granite resists erosion. Over centuries, the statues remained largely intact despite exposure to wind, rain, and temperature changes. This durability allowed Galvahara to survive long after Polonnaruwa ceased to function as a capital. Political power shifted elsewhere. Cities declined. Structures collapsed. But the rock carvings remained. They could not burn. They could not be dismantled easily. They remained part of the landscape. Today, visitors standing before the reclining Buddha often notice the scale first. The body extends far beyond normal human proportion, yet its posture feels natural. The figure appears at rest, not forced, not artificial. The standing Buddha nearby offers a different presence, upright, still, silent. The seated figure remains enclosed, inward, withdrawn. Each form communicates without movement. Here, granite became expression. Stone became stillness. Landscape became sanctuary. Galvahara represents a moment when human craftsmanship and natural material merged completely. The sculptors did not impose their work on the stone. They revealed it from within. And in the quiet forest of Sri Lanka's ancient capital, the giant stone Buddhas remain exactly where they were carved, their presence unchanged, their silence uninterrupted, continuing to hold their place across centuries of human history. The giant stone monoliths of Callanish. A prehistoric stone. Landscape on the Isle of Lewis at Callanish. On a remote island off the northwest coast of Scotland, where the Atlantic Ocean meets open moorland and the sky often stretches in uninterrupted grey, there is a formation of standing stones that has remained in place for thousands of years. From above, the arrangement forms a cross-like pattern with a central circle and long rows of monoliths extending outward. This is Callanish, and these stones have stood here for more than 4,000 years. Each monolith was raised individually. Some reach heights of over 4 meters. Their surfaces are rough and weathered, shaped by centuries of wind and rain. They were carved from local Louisian gneiss, one of the oldest types of rock on Earth. The stones were not placed randomly. They were positioned deliberately. Each stone occupies a precise location. The central circle forms the core of the monument. Around it, rows of standing stones extend outward in straight lines, creating a structured geometric pattern. At the center, a chambered tomb was later added, reinforcing the site's ceremonial role. Raising stones of this size required careful planning. Each monolith was quarried from nearby rock sources, shaped, transported, and lifted upright. Without metal tools or machinery, builders relied on human effort, leverage, and coordination. The stones were heavy. Some weigh several tons. Positioning them vertically required digging deep foundation pits. Stones were lowered into place and stabilized using smaller rocks and packed soil. The process demanded patience, precision, balance. The builders of Callanish belonged to Neolithic farming communities that lived on the island during the Late Stone Age. They cultivated crops, raised animals, and developed permanent settlements. Their survival depended on seasonal cycles. The monument reflects awareness of those cycles. Its alignment corresponds with lunar and solar movements. Certain stones align with positions of the moon during major lunar events, which occur only every 18.5 years. This suggests detailed observation of the sky over long periods. The monument functioned as a place where landscape and sky intersected, where time was measured, where meaning was reinforced. Standing within the circle, the stones create a sense of enclosure without forming a wall. Space remains open, yet defined. Movement through the site follows natural paths between monoliths. Each stone shapes perception. Each alignment shapes orientation. Unlike later monuments built for rulers or armies, Callanish reflects collective effort rather than centralized authority. It was likely used by communities for gatherings, ceremonies, and rituals tied to agricultural and astronomical cycles. The monument remained in use for centuries. Over time, environmental and cultural changes altered its role. Peat accumulated around the stones, gradually burying parts of the structure. Some stones became partially submerged in the growing ground layer. This preserved them, protected them, kept them in place. Centuries later, erosion exposed them again. Today, the Callanish stones rise from open moorland, their arrangement still intact. Their surfaces carry the marks of time, but their positions remain unchanged. Standing among them creates a quiet awareness of scale and duration. The stones do not move. They do not change. They remain fixed while weather and light shift around them. Here, stone became marker. Placement became pattern. Landscape became calendar. The Callanish monoliths represent one of humanity's earliest attempts to structure space according to cosmic observation. They demonstrate how prehistoric societies transformed natural materials into lasting expressions of knowledge and belief. Even after 4,000 years, the stones remain upright. And on the quiet island of Lewis, beneath open sky and constant wind, the giant stone monoliths of Callanish continue to stand exactly where they were placed, preserving one of the oldest monumental landscapes in Europe. The giant stone king of the cave, statue of Shapur I, a colossal ruler preserved in stone at Shapur Cave. High in the Zagros Mountains of southern Iran, where steep cliffs rise above forested valleys and narrow paths wind upward into the rock, there is a cave entrance that opens into darkness. From the outside, it appears like any other natural formation. But deep inside, standing silently in the center of the cave chamber, there is a human figure carved from stone. It is larger than life, much larger. This is the statue of King Shapur I, and it is one of the tallest ancient stone statues ever carved from a single piece of natural rock. The statue stands approximately 7 meters tall. It was carved directly from a stalagmite, a vertical column of stone formed naturally over thousands of years by mineral deposits from dripping water. Instead of bringing stone into the cave, sculptors used the stone that was already there. They transformed part of the cave itself into the image of a king. The figure stands upright, balanced, and symmetrical. The head is held high. The shoulders are broad. The arms fall naturally at the sides. The posture conveys calm authority rather than movement. This was intentional. The statue represents Shapur I, one of the most powerful rulers of the Sasanian Empire, which controlled large parts of the Middle East during the 3rd century CE. Under his rule, the empire expanded its territory and strengthened its position against rival powers, including the Roman Empire. Shapur I was known for military success and political strength. He ruled. He commanded. He endured. The decision to carve his image inside a mountain cave reflects symbolic thinking. The mountain itself represented permanence. By placing his image within it, the king became associated with endurance beyond human lifespan. The cave became monument. The rock became ruler. Creating the statue required careful planning. Sculptors worked inside the cave, shaping the stalagmite slowly. Unlike quarry stone, the stalagmite could not be removed or repositioned. Every cut had to preserve balance and structural stability. They carved the head first, then the torso, then the arms and legs. Surface details were refined gradually. The king's clothing is visible in the carving. Long robes fall vertically, with folds defined by shallow grooves. The belt at the waist marks the transition between upper and lower body. The face, though weathered, retains its original form. The statue does not appear separate from the cave. It appears born from it. The cave itself is large and naturally formed, extending deep into the mountain. Its interior provides natural protection from weather. This helped preserve the statue across centuries. Unlike statues exposed to wind and rain, this figure remained sheltered. It endured. The exact reason for placing the statue in this cave remains partly symbolic. the cave may have held spiritual significance. Mountains and caves often represented connection between earth and deeper forces in ancient belief systems. Positioning the king here linked his image to natural permanence. It reinforced authority. It reinforced memory. Over time, the statue experienced damage. At some point, likely due to structural weakening or seismic activity, it fell. The massive figure collapsed onto the cave floor, where it remained for centuries. Even fallen, its scale remained evident. In the 20th century, efforts were made to restore the statue. Engineers and archaeologists carefully raised it back into standing position, stabilizing its base and reinforcing its structure. Today, the statue stands again, inside the cave, exactly where it was first carved. Reaching the statue requires climbing into the mountains. The path leads upward through forest and stone. The cave entrance appears gradually. Inside, light fades, and the figure emerges from shadow. Standing before it reveals its scale. Clearly, the human form is familiar, but enlarged, solid, unmoving. Here, stalagmite became king, cave became monument, stone became authority. The statue of Shapur I represents more than portraiture. It represents the merging of natural formation and human intention. Instead of shaping stone brought from outside, sculptors transformed part of the earth itself into an image of political power. Even after more than 1,700 years, the statue remains standing. And deep inside the Zagros Mountains, in the quiet darkness of a natural cave, the stone king continues to stand exactly where ancient hands first gave him form. The giant Buddha of Longmen. A mountain transformed into sacred stone at Longmen Grottos. Along the banks of the Yi River in central China, where limestone cliffs rise steeply from the water and form a natural boundary between earth and sky, there is a mountainside covered with thousands of carvings. From a distance, the cliff appears textured and uneven. But as you move closer, human forms begin to emerge from the stone. Faces, figures, shapes carved directly into the mountain. At the center of it all sits the largest and most commanding figure of the entire site, the giant Buddha of Longmen. This monumental statue, known as the Vairocana Buddha, stands more than 17 meters tall. Its head alone measures several meters in height. The ears extend downward along the sides of the face. The body sits upright, carved directly into the limestone cliff. It does not stand in front of the mountain. It is part of the mountain. The Longmen Grottos were created over several centuries, beginning in the late 5th century CE and continuing into the Tang dynasty. During this time, Buddhism was expanding throughout China, supported by imperial patronage and cultural exchange along major trade routes. Longmen became one of the most important centers of Buddhist sculpture in the country. The Vairocana Buddha represents the peak of that effort. The statue sits within the Fengxian temple section of the grotto complex. Surrounding it are smaller carved figures, including disciples, guardians, and attendants. These figures frame the central Buddha, reinforcing its importance. But it is the central figure that dominates the space. Its expression is calm, balanced, unmoving. The face is slightly rounded, with smooth contours and symmetrical features. The eyes are half closed, suggesting inward awareness. The mouth rests in a neutral position, neither smiling nor stern. The posture conveys stillness, not action, not movement, stillness, carving a figure. Of this scale required removing enormous quantities of rock. Workers began by outlining the shape of the Buddha on the cliff face. They removed material gradually, shaping the body from the outside inward. Iron tools were used to chip away at the limestone. Every strike was permanent. Every surface had to be shaped carefully. The statue could not be assembled or corrected. It could only be revealed. The process likely took many years. Teams of sculptors worked in coordination, focusing on different sections of the figure. Larger shapes were carved first. Details were added later. The limestone itself allowed for precise carving. It was firm enough to hold structure, but soft enough to shape with tools available at the time. The scale of the statue required engineering awareness. The cliff had to remain stable. weight distribution had to be balanced. The carved figure could not weaken the surrounding rock. Despite these challenges, the statue has endured for more than 1,400 years. The Longmen grottos contain more than 100,000 carvings in total. Most are small. Some are medium-sized. But the Vairocana Buddha remains the largest and most prominent. Its scale defines the site. The statue reflects the power and stability of the Tang dynasty, one of China's most influential historical periods. During this time, art, architecture, and religious expression reached new levels of development. Imperial support made large-scale carving possible. Resources were available. Labor was organized. Vision was sustained. The statue represents both religious devotion and political strength. Over centuries, natural erosion affected the surface of the carving. Wind and rain softened some details, but the overall structure remained intact. The limestone held its form. The mountain protected its shape. Visitors today walk along paths beside the river, looking up at the cliff. The Buddha appears gradually as perspective changes. From certain angles, the full figure becomes visible. Standing beneath it emphasizes scale. The human body appears small by comparison. The figure remains calm, unchanged. Here, limestone became presence. Cliff became monument. Stone became awareness. The giant Buddha of Longmen represents one of the most refined examples of large-scale stone carving in human history. It demonstrates how natural landscape and human intention can merge to create lasting form. And along the quiet banks of the Yi River, carved into the mountain itself, the giant Buddha continues to sit in stillness, exactly where it was shaped more than 14 centuries ago. The giant stone monument of the Barabar Caves. Precision. Carved granite in the age of the Mauryan Empire at Barabar Caves. In the granite hills of Bihar in eastern India, where rocky ridges rise above the surrounding plains and vegetation grows between exposed stone surfaces. There are cave entrances cut directly into the mountain. From the outside, the openings appear simple. But stepping inside reveals something unexpected. The walls are perfectly smooth. The surfaces reflect light. The stone feels shaped beyond natural form. These are the Barabar Caves, and they represent some of the earliest and most precise rock-cut monuments ever created in India. The caves were carved during the 3rd century BCE, under the rule of Emperor Ashoka of the Mauryan Empire. This empire controlled most of the Indian subcontinent and was one of the largest and most organized political systems of its time. Ashoka ordered the creation of these caves for use by religious communities, particularly ascetic groups known as the Ajivikas. These groups lived simple lives focused on meditation and spiritual discipline. The caves were designed to provide quiet, stable environments, shelter from weather, separation from the outside world. But what makes the Barabar Caves remarkable is not only their purpose, it is their precision. The caves were carved directly into extremely hard granite. Granite is far more difficult to shape than softer stones like sandstone or limestone. Yet the interior surfaces of the Barabar Caves were finished with extraordinary smoothness. The walls are polished to a mirror-like surface. Light reflects clearly. Sound echoes sharply. This level of finish is rare even in later periods. Creating such surfaces required sustained effort. Workers used iron tools to cut into the granite, removing material slowly. After shaping the chamber, they polished the stone through repeated abrasion. This process may have taken years for a single cave. The chambers themselves follow simple geometric forms. Most consist of rectangular entry halls leading into circular or semicircular interior spaces. The transitions between surfaces are smooth and continuous, and there are no visible joints, no separate blocks. The caves are carved from a single mass of stone. The entrance to the Lomas Rishi cave is especially notable. Its doorway is carved with decorative patterns imitating wooden architecture. This suggests that stone construction was adapting forms originally developed in wood. Stone was replacing temporary material, creating permanence. The caves also feature inscriptions carved directly into the granite. These inscriptions record the dedication of the caves by Emperor Ashoka and his successors. They confirmed the cave's origin and purpose. The inscriptions themselves remain visible today, their surfaces preserved by the hardness of the stone. The Mauryan Empire possessed the organization and resources necessary for such construction. Labor forces could be directed toward large projects. Skilled craftsmen developed techniques refined through experience. The Barabar caves reflect this level of coordination. They were not experimental, they were deliberate. Inside the caves, sound behaves differently. Even small movements create echoes that carry across the chamber. The smooth surfaces reflect sound efficiently. This creates a quiet but present acoustic environment. Light entering through the doorway reflects along the polished walls. The stone surface appears almost metallic in places. This visual effect reinforces the sense of precision. Over more than 2,000 years, the caves have remained intact. Granite resists erosion. The mountain protects the interior. Weather changes outside. The interior remains stable. Visitors today walking into the caves encounter the same surfaces shaped during the Mauryan period. The smooth walls still reflect light. The inscriptions remain legible. Standing inside, it becomes clear that this was not simply excavation. It was transformation. Here, granite became architecture. Surface became reflection. Mountain became sanctuary. The Barabar caves represent one of the earliest surviving examples of advanced stone carving in India. They demonstrate how human skill and patience can reshape even the hardest materials into precise, controlled forms. And in the granite hills of Bihar, carved directly into the mountain and preserved across more than 2 millennia, these caves remain exactly as they were created, holding their shape, their silence, and their presence in stone. The giant stone vat of Viminacium. A monumental artifact of Roman industry at Viminacium. Along the banks of the Danube River in what is now eastern Serbia, there once stood a major Roman city known as Viminacium. Today, its remains lie beneath open fields, where the outlines of streets, buildings, and buried structures still mark the presence of a once active urban center. This was not a small settlement. It was a provincial capital, a military base, a center of trade and production. Among the many objects discovered at Viminacium is a massive carved stone container, often described as a stone vat. Unlike statues or monuments built for display, this object was created for practical use. Yet its scale and construction reflect the same level of precision and effort found in more visible monuments. The vat was carved from a single block of stone. Its walls are thick, its interior hollowed, its surface shaped carefully to hold and contain material. Creating such an object required removing large quantities of stone from its center while preserving the strength of its outer structure. Workers carved the interior gradually, shaping the cavity without cracking the surrounding stone. This required control, patience, understanding of material. Stone vats like this were used for industrial and agricultural processes. They could serve for storing liquids, processing food products, or supporting craft production. In Roman cities, stone containers played an important role in daily economic activity. They held water, wine, oil, other essential materials. Their durability made them reliable. Their weight made them stable. The presence of such a vat at Viminacium reflects the city's organized infrastructure. The Romans built cities according to structured plans. Roads connected different districts. Water systems supplied residents. Workshops supported production. Everything had purpose, and everything had place. Viminacium itself was founded in the 1st century CE and became one of the most important Roman settlements along the Danube frontier. It served as headquarters for Roman legions and supported both military and civilian populations. At its height, tens of thousands of people lived here. Buildings covered large areas. Public spaces organized daily life. Industrial facilities supported economic activity. The stone vat formed part of that system. Its creation reflects Roman stoneworking skill. Quarry workers extracted large stone blocks from natural sources. Craftsmen shaped these blocks using iron tools. Interior surfaces were refined gradually to create smooth, functional containers. The process transformed raw stone into useful infrastructure. Unlike temporary containers made from wood or clay, stone vats endured. They resisted decay. They remained stable across generations. Over centuries, Viminacium declined. Military priorities shifted. Trade routes changed. The city was gradually abandoned. Soil and sediment covered its remains. The stone vat remained buried, protected by earth, preserved by time. When archaeologists uncovered the site, the vat emerged as evidence of the city's functional complexity. It demonstrated how Roman engineering extended beyond monuments and roads into everyday systems of production and storage. Standing beside such an object today reveals its scale. It is not easily moved. Its weight anchors it firmly to the ground. It was meant to stay. It was meant to serve. Here, stone became utility. Mass became stability. Form became function. The giant stone vat of Viminacium represents a different kind of monument. It was not built to honor kings or gods. It was built to support life within a functioning city. It reminds us that ancient civilizations expressed their sophistication not only through visible monuments, but through the infrastructure that made daily life possible. And beneath the open fields of eastern Serbia, in the quiet remains of a Roman city, the stone vat continues to preserve the memory of the systems that once sustained one of Rome's great frontier settlements, the giant basalt throne of Pasargadae. The stone seat of the first Persian Empire at Pasargadae. In the open plains of southern Iran, surrounded by low hills and wide horizons, there are the remains of a city that once stood at the center of one of the most powerful empires in the ancient world. Today, only fragments remain. Stone platforms, broken columns, foundations shaped by human hands more than 2,500 years ago. This is Pasargadae, the first capital of the Achaemenid Empire. Founded in the 6th century BCE by Cyrus the Great, Pasargadae was not only a political center, but also a symbolic one. It represented the beginning of imperial Persia, a place where authority, architecture, and landscape were brought together into a single vision. Among its surviving structures is a massive stone platform, often described as a throne-like base. It rises from the ground in carefully shaped blocks, each stone placed deliberately to create elevation above the surrounding terrain. It does not resemble a chair in the ordinary sense. It resembles authority made permanent. The platform was constructed using enormous blocks of stone, cut and transported from nearby quarries. Each block was shaped with precision and fitted tightly against its neighbors. The surface was leveled carefully, creating a stable and elevated foundation. Elevation was not accidental. Elevation defined importance. Standing above others created separation. Separation created authority. This platform likely served as part of a ceremonial or audience structure, where the king would appear before subjects, officials, or visitors. From this elevated position, the ruler could be seen clearly, physically positioned above those who approached. The architecture reinforced hierarchy. The stone made that hierarchy permanent. Cyrus the Great founded Pasargadae, after establishing control over vast territories. His empire stretched across multiple regions, bringing together diverse cultures under centralized leadership. The capital reflected that scale. Stone became expression of unity. Architecture became expression of order. The platform itself was built using techniques characteristic of Achaemenid engineering. Workers shaped stone surfaces carefully to ensure stability. They aligned edges precisely. They positioned each block so that weight was distributed evenly. This prevented collapse. It ensured endurance. The size of the stones reflects organized labor. Quarrying required coordinated effort. Transport required planning. Placement required precision. Nothing was random. Everything was intentional. Pasargadae included palaces, gardens, gates, and ceremonial spaces. The throne platform formed part of this larger environment. It was not isolated. It was integrated into a designed landscape where architecture guided movement and perception. Visitors approaching the platform would move through open courtyards and structured pathways. The elevated stone surface created a focal point. It drew attention. It defined space. The use of basalt and limestone added durability. These materials resist erosion and weathering. Even after centuries of exposure, the stone platform remains visible. Its edges remain defined. Its structure remains stable. The throne itself, if it existed above the platform, may have been constructed from wood or other materials that did not survive. What remains is the foundation, the permanent part, the immovable part. Over time, the political center of the empire shifted to Persepolis. Pasargadae gradually declined in importance. Buildings deteriorated, columns fell, walls collapsed, but the stone platforms endured. They could not decay like wood. They could not vanish easily. Today, standing beside the platform reveals its scale. The stones are larger than expected. Their surfaces show marks of ancient tools. Their alignment remains exact. The platform still rises above the ground, still creates elevation, still creates presence. Here, stone became authority. Height became symbol. Platform became throne. The giant basalt throne of Pasargadae represents the physical foundation of one of the earliest empires in recorded history. It reflects a moment when rulers used architecture to define power, using stone to transform political authority into lasting form. And in the quiet plains of southern Iran, beneath open sky and shifting light, the massive stone platform remains exactly where it was placed, preserving the memory of the empire that first rose from this landscape. The giant stone statue of Kartli, a silent figure from the ancient Caucasus. In the mountainous landscapes of Georgia, where valleys cut between ridges of stone and rivers move steadily through open terrain, there are places where the past remains visible in quiet and unexpected ways. Scattered across parts of the Kartli region, archaeologists have uncovered ancient stone figures carved in human form. They do not stand in large numbers. They do not dominate the skyline. But their presence is unmistakable. These are the stone statues of Kartli, and they represent some of the oldest human figures carved in stone in the Caucasus region. Unlike polished statues from later civilizations, these figures are simple in form. The body is upright. The head is defined clearly. The shoulders are squared. Arms are often carved close to the torso. Some figures hold symbolic objects, while others stand with empty hands. Their surfaces are worn, their details softened by time. But their shape remains clear. These statues were carved from large blocks of local stone, shaped using tools available in ancient periods. The exact date of many Kartli statues remains uncertain, but they are believed to originate from early historical or late prehistoric societies that lived in this region thousands of years ago. The stone itself provided durability. It preserved form. It resisted decay. Carving human figures into stone reflects intention beyond practical function. These statues were not tools. They were not containers. They were representations. They stood for something, possibly ancestors, possibly leaders, possibly symbolic guardians. Their placement suggests connection to burial sites or ceremonial landscapes. In many ancient cultures, stone figures marked important locations, reinforcing memory and identity. They created permanence. They marked presence. The Kartli region has long served as a crossroads between Europe and Asia. Trade routes passed through its valleys. Cultures interacted here. Ideas moved alongside goods. The stone statues reflect that environment. They represent communities rooted in landscape but connected to broader historical movement. Creating such figures required quarrying stone and shaping it gradually. Workers removed material using repeated strikes. Every contour emerged slowly. Unlike molded materials, stone carving allowed no reversal. Every cut mattered. The figures were designed to endure outdoors. They faced weather, temperature change, and erosion. Over centuries, wind softened edges. Rain shaped surfaces. But the overall forms remained. Standing beside one of these statues today reveals their scale. They are larger than ordinary objects, but smaller than monumental statues of later empires. Their power lies in presence rather than size. They do not move. They do not change. They remain fixed. Their simplicity gives them strength. They represent human form reduced to essential shape: head, body, posture, presence. Unlike statues placed inside buildings, these figures existed in open landscape. They interacted with sky, ground, and horizon. Their meaning was connected to place. They marked territory. They marked memory. They marked identity. Over time, civilizations rose and fell across the Caucasus region. Kingdoms formed. Empires passed through. Borders shifted. The stone figures remained. They outlasted the societies that created them. They became part of the landscape itself. Archaeological study continues to reveal more about their origin and purpose. Each statue provides clues about cultural practices, belief systems, and artistic traditions of early Caucasus societies. They represent continuity across centuries. Continuity expressed through stone. Here, rock became human form. Carving became memory. Landscape became archive. The giant stone statues of Kartli remind us that even in regions without massive pyramids or towering temples, ancient societies still expressed identity through permanent material. They shaped stone to preserve presence. They created figures that could stand beyond individual lifetimes. And in the valleys and hills of Georgia, beneath open sky and shifting seasons, these ancient stone figures continue to stand in silence, preserving the memory of the people who first gave them form. The stone pillars of La Quemada, the silent columns of an ancient hilltop city at La Quemada. On a hilltop in the dry highlands of northern Mexico, where rocky slopes rise above open plains and the horizon stretches outward in every direction, there are the remains of a stone-built city that once stood as one of the most important settlements in the region. This is La Quemada, and among its most striking features are rows of massive stone pillars that still stand where they were placed more than 1,400 years ago. From a distance, the site appears as a collection of terraces and walls built into the hillside. But as you move closer, the pillars become visible. They rise from rectangular stone platforms, evenly spaced, forming what archaeologists now call the Hall of Columns. These pillars were not decorative. They were structural. They supported roofs. They defined interior space. They shaped movement. Each pillar was constructed from stacked stone blocks, carefully aligned to create vertical columns capable of supporting significant weight. Their placement was precise, forming organized rows that created large covered areas. This was architecture designed with intention. La Quemada was occupied between roughly 300 and 900 CE. During this period, it functioned as a major regional center, connected to trade routes and cultural networks that extended across Mesoamerica. Its hilltop location provided visibility across surrounding land. It provided defense. It provided authority. Building a city in such a location required planning and coordination. Stone had to be quarried, transported uphill, and assembled into terraces, walls, and columns. Each pillar represented hours of labor. Each stone was placed deliberately. The Hall of Columns likely served as a gathering space. It may have functioned as a ceremonial area, administrative center, or place for social assembly. The roof it supported has long since disappeared, but the pillars remain. They preserve the outline of the structure. They preserve its scale. They preserve its presence. Life at La Quemada involved agriculture, trade, and organized community activity. The settlement was not isolated. It interacted with other cultures across the region, exchanging goods and ideas. The pillars reflect that level of development. They represent structured construction. They represent organized labor. They represent architectural knowledge. Unlike monuments carved from single stones, these pillars were assembled from multiple pieces. Yet their stability came from careful alignment and balanced weight distribution. Over centuries, environmental forces altered the site. Wood used in roofing decayed. Soil shifted. Some pillars collapsed. Others remained standing. Their survival reflects the durability of stone and the effectiveness of their construction. Today, walking among the pillars reveals their original arrangement. They form lines. They define space. They suggest enclosure even without walls or roof. The structure remains readable, even in ruin. Here, stone became support, alignment became structure, column became architecture. La Quemada itself was eventually abandoned. The reasons remain uncertain. Environmental change, shifting trade routes, or social transformation may have contributed to its decline. But the pillars endured. They remained on the hill. They remained visible. They remained present. Standing among them today, the landscape stretches outward in silence. The pillars rise from the ground, unchanged in position. They no longer support a roof, but they continue to support memory. They mark the presence of a city that once existed here. A city built in stone. A city shaped by human intention. And on the hilltops of northern Mexico, beneath open sky and constant wind, the stone pillars of La Quemada continue to stand exactly where they were placed, preserving the outline of one of Mesoamerica's forgotten ancient cities, platform block of Ollantaytambo, the immovable monolith of the Inca highlands at Ollantaytambo, high in the Andes Mountains of Peru, where steep slopes rise sharply above narrow valleys and cold air moves across stone terraces. There is an ancient Inca site where some of the largest stones ever moved in the Americas still remain in place. Massive blocks of pink granite form walls, platforms, and foundations, fitted together with precision. This is Ollantaytambo, and here, one of the most extraordinary stone blocks ever shaped by the Inca still rests where it was placed centuries ago. The block is enormous. Its surfaces are flat and precise. Its edges are straight. Its weight reaches many tons. It forms part of a platform structure near what is now known as the Temple of the Sun, one of the most important ceremonial areas of the site. Unlike smaller stones used in residential construction, these blocks were selected specifically for monumental architecture. They were meant to define space. They were meant to endure. The stone itself was quarried from mountains located across the valley, several kilometers away. This alone presents a challenge. The terrain between quarry and construction site includes steep slopes, uneven ground, and river crossings. Transporting a stone of this size required organized labor and careful planning. The Inca did not use wheeled vehicles. They did not use metal cranes. They relied on human effort. Ropes, levers, inclined ramps. Groups of workers moved stones slowly, step by step, adjusting position continuously. The process may have taken weeks or months for a single block. Once the stone reached the construction site, it was shaped further. Workers smoothed surfaces and refined edges using harder stone tools. Each face had to align perfectly with neighboring blocks. This precision allowed stones to fit together without mortar. The result was structural stability and resistance to environmental forces. Ollantaytambo itself was both a fortress and a ceremonial center. Its terraces climbed the mountain slope in organized layers. Above them, monumental stone structures mark important ritual areas. The giant platform blocks formed the foundation for sacred space. Elevation reinforced significance. Height reinforced authority. Some stones at Ollantaytambo remain unfinished. Their surfaces show partial shaping, revealing the stages of construction. This provides rare insight into Inca building methods. It shows process, not only result. The decision to use such massive stones reflects cultural values. Monumental construction expressed power, organization, and connection to landscape. The Inca viewed mountains as sacred entities, and building with mountain stone reinforced this relationship. Stone connected human activity to natural environment. It created continuity. It created permanence. Ollantaytambo was also strategically important. Its elevated position allowed defense and observation. During the Spanish conquest in the 16th century, Inca forces used the site as a stronghold. The stone structures played defensive roles. They formed barriers. They controlled movement. Even under pressure, the walls remained stable. Over centuries, weather and erosion affected parts of the site. But the giant platform blocks endured. Their mass prevented displacement. Their precision preserved alignment. Today, visitors walking through Ollantaytambo encounter these stones exactly where they were placed. Standing beside one reveals its scale clearly. The surface feels smooth. The edges remain defined. The stone appears permanent, unmovable. Here, granite became foundation. Mass became stability. Platform became authority. The giant stone platform block of Ollantaytambo represents one of the most advanced achievements of Inca engineering. It demonstrates how human effort and planning transformed raw material into lasting structure. And high in the Andes, surrounded by mountains and open sky, the massive stone blocks of Ollantaytambo continue to hold their place, preserving the legacy of a civilization that shaped the landscape itself through stone. The giant stone mask of Cohunlich, the monumental face of the Maya sun. Deep in the forests of southeastern Mexico, far from modern cities and highways, there is an ancient Maya city where the surface of a pyramid was transformed into something far more than architecture. It became a face, not a small carving, not a symbol hidden in detail, but a massive human form built directly into the structure itself. This is Cohunlich, and here, the builders of the Maya world created some of the largest stucco masks ever constructed in Mesoamerica. The pyramid rises gradually from the forest floor, its stone surface partially covered by vegetation that has grown over centuries. At first, it appears like many other Maya structures, shaped by time, softened by erosion, and surrounded by trees. But as you approach closer, the illusion changes. Large human faces begin to emerge from the sides of the staircase. They do not sit on the structure. They are part of it. Each mask stands over, 2 meters tall, positioned carefully along the central stairway that leads toward the summit of the pyramid. Their scale immediately changes the experience of the space, making the structure feel inhabited by something permanent and watchful. The eyes are wide. The nose is strong and extended. The mouth is calm and balanced. The expression does not show emotion. It shows presence. These masks were created during the early classic period of Maya civilization, roughly between 250 and 600 CE, when cities across the region were expanding and monumental construction was becoming increasingly sophisticated. Cohunlich was one of many urban centers active during this time, connected to wider cultural networks that shared architectural ideas, artistic traditions, and religious belief. The pyramid itself was built using limestone blocks, carefully stacked and aligned to create a stable and lasting structure. Once the main construction was complete, artisans applied thick layers of stucco over the stone surface, gradually shaping the material by hand until the form of the face emerged. This process required patience, it required planning, and it required precision. The stucco allowed sculptors to create details that would have been difficult to achieve with stone alone. They shaped the curves of the cheeks, the edges of the lips, and the contours of the eyes, refining each surface until the final image was clear. Originally, the masks were painted. Bright pigments covered the surface. Red, yellow, blue. These colors made the faces visible from far below, transforming the pyramid into a powerful visual presence within the city. The masks most likely represent the Maya sun deity, a central figure in Maya cosmology and belief. The sun was not simply an object in the sky. It was a force that defined time, governed agriculture, and structured daily life. It rose, it moved, it returned again. This cycle represented continuity and stability. By placing the image of the sun deity directly onto the pyramid, the builders created a permanent connection between the structure and the cosmic order they believed governed the world. Anyone approaching the pyramid would pass between these faces. They would not ignore them. They would experience them. The masks transformed movement into ceremony. They shaped perception. They defined space. Over centuries, the city of Cohunlich continued to develop, with new structures built and older ones modified or abandoned. Trade routes shifted. Populations moved. Environmental conditions changed. Eventually, the city was no longer occupied. The forest returned. Trees grew around the structures. Roots moved through cracks in the stone. But the masks endured. Their size protected them. Their position preserved them. Today, standing beside one of these masks reveals the true scale of Maya construction. The face rises above eye level. The features remain clear despite centuries of erosion. It does not appear fragile. It appears permanent, The pyramid itself remained stable, its stone core supporting the stucco surfaces that still hold the shape created by ancient hands. Even after more than 1,500 years, the masks continue to define the structure, continuing to communicate the presence they were designed to represent. Here, architecture became identity, stone became belief, structure became symbol. The giant stone masks of Kohunlik remain one of the clearest examples of how Maya builders integrated sculpture directly into architecture, creating monuments that were not only structural but symbolic, not only functional but meaningful. And deep in the forests of Mexico, surrounded by silence and time, the giant faces of Kohunlich continue to watch outward, exactly as they have for more than 1,000 years.